Welcome everyone to the season finale of the Self-Funding Shark Tank. We are going to give everyone a minute to get in, get settled, and we will start shortly. Okay, we are going to get this started. Welcome again to our season finale. It has been a terrific ride, meeting incredible CEOs and having very productive conversations on healthcare optimization. And today we've saved one of the best for the epic conclusion. If you've been following our Shark Tank updates, you know what I'm talking about. And I will let Keith introduce our CEO in just a moment. Just some housekeeping, same style webinar format. We have 30 minutes, of an interactive meeting. Afterward, we will debrief and discuss interesting nuggets, takeaways, and areas of growth. You will have opportunities to ask questions at the end. Please feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box, and we will get to as many as possible. And saying this for the last time this season, Keith, please take it away.
Terrific. Thank you, Megan. And today we are joined by Brett Schulman, founder and CEO of Cava Fast Casual Restaurants. Cava is a national Mediterranean style fast casual concept that is taken the market by storm. Been around a little over 10 years, and to date, between their Zoe's concepts and Cava concepts, they have almost 300 standalone stores around the nation. Brett and his team have raised just shy of about $700 million, and they are going to continue to amp up the opportunity to feed people like they were at home. They are all about workforce development, culture, the digital experience, and a lot of working with local farmers to provide the fresh kind of quality food that I think many families are looking for. Brett and his team have been recognized by Fast Company as one of the 50 most innovative companies in the nation. And Brett also, prior to creating and founding Cava with his partners, was a former investment banker and does a great deal of mentoring for the Culinary Institute of America. And with that, I'm going to open up the floor to John Augustine, who's Senior Vice President of WellNet. And John today is going to be playing the role of broker advisor, how to have conversations with CEOs, and not so much about group benefits and health plans, but about culture and cash preservation, workforce development, enhancement. How do we take care of our people, and how do we do it in a way that makes sense? How do we educate them? And on the heels of inflation and recession pending possibly, this is bound to be one of the best Shark Tanks to date. And with that, let me turn the floor over to John. John, go ahead.
Keith, thank you. And as Keith said, for our audience today, I'll be playing the role of a consultant that doesn't work at WellNet and helping Brett understand what's possible through a self-funded health plan with an independent health plan administrator. I wanted to start today by giving Cava a shameless plug. So about 5 years ago, I ate at Cava for the first time in DC with Keith Lemmer. And right when you go in, for those of you that have never eaten at Cava, I was at least blown away by the fresh food behind the counter, the colors, everything. I'm a big fan of Mediterranean food. And right away, I thought to myself, this is exactly the type of restaurant I would build if I was a restaurateur. I'm not, though, which you'll all be grateful about. Anyway, for those of you that have never eaten at Cava, or those that do, try the harissa, try the tzatziki, and the pickled onions. That's the three things I get on all my stuff when I go to Cava, and I usually get the grain bowl, but they have salads, all kinds of cool stuff. Brett, I wanted to commend you too on two things that I read as I was researching, and that was your work with two different nonprofits, one being City Blossoms and the other being Garden School Foundation. Both of these basically work with kids, for those of you that never heard of them, to teach them how to garden, eat fresh, compost, things like that. One of them is in Los Angeles schools and one of them is in DC. And I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I've spent the last 5 years transitioning my backyard into a forest garden. And I've seen firsthand the impact that has on kids when they see where food is grown. I mean, my son eats cucumbers, lettuce, Swiss chard, herbs, berries, fruit, right off the trees, right off the plants. And that's so much different than most kids today. So that work is just tremendously awesome. And that leads me to my first question, which is, I hope, a cool question for you, which is, as the CEO of Cava, an awesome food company, and as a father of 3, what gives you the greatest joy in your role as a father and CEO?
Yeah, John, thanks for having me. The greatest role is, I think being a parent is the most difficult, rewarding job you can have. And I like to say, I joke sometimes, I have 3 kids at home and I've got 7,000 at work. And I want to make them all kind of grow up and develop successfully and thrive in the world we live in. So seeing my children grow up to be great humans, and seeing our team members develop and grow with our company, both personally and professionally, as our business grows. That's what gets me out of bed every Monday.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I hope that by the end of our conversation today, you realize how Cava and your executive team will be able to build an even better health plan for your team members with the right administrative partner. I have a little bit of background on your company in the sense that you use United Healthcare on a fully insured basis, and you have about 700 team members enrolled in the plan. Do you happen to know, and it's okay if you don't, how many plans you guys offer and what the deductibles might be?
Yeah, we shifted this year and got it very focused on 1 PPO and 1 HSA with a higher deductible. So I believe the deductible on the HSA is $3,500, I believe. Don't have that offhand. One, obviously the HSA is a higher deductible. We'll match contributions up to a certain level in the HSA to help encourage contributions to the HSA. And then if you want a lower deductible plan, a more premium plan, the PPO is the option there. We used to have 2 HSAs, but we moved to just 1 to try and simplify for our team members.
Makes sense. And do you happen to know what the deductible is on the PPO?
I believe it's $1,200.
Okay. All right, cool. And then a last question before I dive into what's possible. Money aside, cost being no issue whatsoever, what would you, Melissa, Kelly, and Trisha do from a coverage perspective to improve your medical and prescription plan, money being no topic, if you could today?
Well, one of the a few of the things we really focus on our DE&I initiative. So creating an inclusive healthcare plan that addresses all of our team members' needs. And those needs are very diverse. Obviously, with 700 people on our plan, we're operating in 24 states today. So things we've added over the years were fertility benefits, also mental health benefits. We actually have that separate from our plan. We have EAP, but we also have, we launched Talkspace for all of our team members, whether you're on our health plan or not. And that's available not just to our team members, but also their family members. So thinking about our team members' well-being, not just their healthcare, trying to think about it holistically, their well-being. So looking at other opportunities that we can do through our health plan to address that total well-being.
Which would then further enhance the awesome culture that you've already built and the family environment that you've built. Thank you. I appreciate that, Brett. All right. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share a couple of slides with you now to help paint a picture of what's possible through an independent health plan administrator and a properly designed self-funded health plan. All right. So let's see here. Come on. All right. So the information on this slide, Brett, is not new to you, but I'd like to use the information on this slide to give you a little bit of perspective on plans built and administered by a mainstream insurance carrier like a United Healthcare, and plans built and and optimized and administered by an independent health plan administrator like a WellNet. And I want to talk about cost shifting, right? And that's the deductible and the premium contribution, the two biggest items on this grid. We know that employers like Kava and most employers across the US are using their medical and prescription plan as your key tool to attract and retain talent. Obviously, culture is massive. Good compensation is super important, but the health plan, more often than not, is the primary tool used to attract and retain. The challenge with that is, from a competitive advantage perspective, most employers like Kava are using the same types of plans offered by the same mainstream insurance carriers. So there's not much differentiation. And most importantly, I think, the one big blunt tool that the mainstream insurance carriers give employers to control the cost of the premium is what I'll loosely refer to as cost shifting. Meaning, and this might sound familiar, you get a 15 or 20% renewal from your insurance carrier. Forget about any negotiation the consultant does. I'll bring that back in a couple of minutes. But you get this 15 or 20% increase from the carrier, and the only way to get that down is really to shift cost. You're either going to shift some of that premium onto your people, or you're going to shift to higher deductibles, higher copays, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you guys made a big shift, likely when you moved from a Care First, which I knew you were with a few years ago, over to UHC, and you refined the plans, maybe lowered the deductibles a bit. But over time now, as your premium starts to creep back up with United Healthcare, that cost shifting blunt tool is going to come back into play. Certainly, there's been wage growth over the years at Kava, so your people are earning more. But now in recent years, inflation's now chipping away at their earnings. So between the cost shifting and the inflation, what's happening is that the highest utilizers of health plans today tend to take home less money today than they did several years back. And you said earlier, what gets you out of bed, what gets me out of bed every single day is trying to deliver zero or low cost healthcare for hardworking Americans. And that's where I want to go with this slide. So imagine your team, Melissa and Kelly in particular, being able to look a new recruit in the eye. And instead of saying to them, we have two different plans with United Healthcare, they would get to say, we have two different plans through Aetna or Cigna, because that's the plans I can bring to you through my partner WellNet. But every single one of those plans, both of those plans, because you have two plans, give you voluntary pathways to zero cost care for all of these services. Now, Brett, for what it's worth, when you have a qualified high deductible health plan like you have, that HSA plan, we can't quite do it the way I'm outlining it here, but there's ways to incentivize members within a qualified health plan when they use certain high value providers. The point is, the competitive advantage is great because instead of saying more or less the same thing that every other restaurant and every other employer is saying, you would be able to look those new recruits in the eye and say, we give away lots of free care here at Kava. And that, for frankly, someone that's an hourly employee is a massive thing. Recently, I sat in an employee meeting in Florida for a 1,000 Life group that we brought on, and people were crying because for the first time, they knew they could get free healthcare for their family instead of having to pay that $6,300 deductible, which they had. So I've seen it firsthand, and that's what gets me out of bed every day. So for your people, it really is as simple as making a choice, door A versus door B. Right now with United Healthcare, they can go anywhere they want, whenever they want, provided it's a participating provider. You have in-network and out-of-network benefits. The same thing is true with the plans I build with WellNet. We use the Aetna or the Cigna network. We mirror the same plan designs that you would have with United Healthcare. And then we basically give the employees two options. Door A is you self-direct your care. You're going to pay the same copays and deductibles. But the reason we hired WellNet, the reason we hired John is because he built out these pathways. And if you're willing to use certain providers for certain things on a totally voluntary basis, your care is either reduced in cost or absolutely free to you. And that's so awesome for your people. I'm going to pause there. How does that make you feel? Do you have any questions at this point, Brett?
So when you said the coordinated care that directed to certain providers, is that, you know, if we take our current United Healthcare plan, right, and we were to switch to a plan like this, what percentage of the doctors that our team is currently using would be retained. Is that something we can control, or would that have implications based on the direction of what this plan would steer?
Great question. I'm going to give you two answers, the conservative and the aggressive. Generally, whenever we switch from a mainstream insurance carrier network like a UHC to another mainstream insurance carrier network, in this case, Aetna or Cigna, as I've referred to, we're going to see on the low end, maybe 92 to 95% crossover in providers. But most likely what we tend to see is somewhere between 97 and 99% crossover.
And so given that it's a similar large insurer plan, but through WellNet, where are we reaping the cost savings? Is it because of the self-funding aspect versus the fully insured? And then kind of a two-part question, with it being, if it is self-funded, how do you think about if we have some historically high claimant team members that create some stop loss risk in a sense on a self-funded plan?
That's a fantastic question, and I'm going to go there next with how this idea saves Kava money. Certainly, I think you can see the benefit from a recruiting and attracting perspective. That's the first thing. And in the era of the Great Resignation and it being hard to attract top talent, being able to say we give all this away for free or low cost is extremely powerful. To your point, though, and your question, merely moving from a fully insured plan to a self-funded plan, but not doing anything to actually control the cost of claims might save you money, it might not. So I'm not going to suggest that self-funding by itself will save you money, because it may or it may not. The way I'll answer your question is actually with regard to the second part of your question about those high-cost claimants. Right now, well, any employer at any time could have a high-cost claimant. And it's not about if you'll have one, it's when you'll have one. You'll always have them. You'll always have someone that needs something or someone that gets in an accident. Where most employers are failing, but where other employers are succeeding, is having a plan in place for when high-cost claims happen, because of a paradox, if you will, but it's something that I call the dirtiest little secret in healthcare. And so it's worth me talking about this right now because you've brought up the question. Every PPO provider, Brett, gets paid something different for the same service in the same network, in the same town. And I've prepared a few examples for you. So let me say that again. In your United Healthcare plan right now, if yesterday you needed a wrist surgery, where you go for your care is going to result in a radically different amount that United Healthcare might pay that provider. Not what you pay. You're going to pay your deductible if you go and have a wrist surgery. But behind the scenes, UHC is paying every provider a radically different amount. Some say at this point, how could that be? What? That's crazy. It isn't. It isn't. I mean, the network's biggest value proposition, United's biggest value proposition, is we have all the doctors. That's what Cigna would say. We got all these docs in our network. Blue Cross would say the same thing. Well, the way you get all the docs in the network is pay them whatever they want. If you go out to a doc and say, we want you in our network, first thing the doc's going to say is, here's how much I get paid, and the network stamp it. So the net result, Brett, is this example that I built for you in DC. This takes 10 different procedures, common procedures, and shows you the low Cigna cost and the high Cigna cost, and then the average price variance across these 10 different procedures. Again, this isn't what you pay as a member. You're going to pay the same amount no matter where you go. That's why people don't care. I'll go wherever my doctor tells me to go. Well, that's where the biggest opportunity lies. If you're trying to save money in a health plan, figure out as a team how to consume what we call higher value care. Higher value being defined as equal or better quality of provider at a lower price point. Sometimes it takes showing something in an absolutely ridiculous way to get people's attention and to get them to look at things a little bit differently. If we took this average cost variance and applied it to today's average gallon of gas in DC, the gallon of gas would cost $41. And obviously, Brett, you wouldn't approve an expense account for one of your people that is trying to get you over on $41 a gallon. but this is happening every single day in your health plan. With 700 people, you're incurring tens of thousands of claims every year. And every single one of those claims theoretically is an opportunity to have consumed higher value care. And in a self-funded environment, you only pay for the health care that your people consume. And so if we work as a team to build out these pathways to guide people to higher value care, you can dramatically lower the cost of your claims while giving away all this care for free to your people on a voluntary basis. I'll go back to this. What thoughts do you have when you see this? And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, look, in theory, it's great, right? Like you even, give you an analogy, you can build a same quality website and have someone charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars and someone charge you tens of thousands of dollars. So I guess my question would be, if you are using a self-funded plan and creating these pathways, what does that look like from a practical standpoint and an administrative standpoint to manage a platform or the capabilities to direct people to the more effective, efficient cost provider while not diminishing the quality of care?
Great question. So WellNet in particular uses this talk track of crawl, walk, and run. And it's really about change management. It's a continuum. What I've described to you so far is what they would refer to as the crawl approach, which is where we take a plan like you've got today, mirror the plan designs using the Aetna or the Cigna network. So we're going to give your people the same brand names they're used to. Their ID card is going to look very similar. The plan designs are mirrored, same copays, same deductibles, etc. But then we offer them incentives to voluntarily use certain other providers. It's very simple. It's literally for them as simple as door A versus door B. And this is kind of how we explain it to them. In other words, when you go and use your healthcare plan, if you do nothing and you just do whatever you want and go where your doctor says, you have the same copays and deductibles. But if you're willing to slow down and use certain providers for certain things, and here's a listing, so we educate them on exactly how to access these pathways. This is how you earn your incentive. So we keep it super simple in the first year, and then at a pace that's comfortable for you and your executive team, and in ways that make the most sense for your team members, your executive team, and CAVA as a whole, we can start to evolve that health plan. What I've found in my own career is once someone like you and your executive team gets into an environment like this, your eyes are open. It's almost like the Wizard of Oz. You pull the curtain back and you see exactly how everything works. Or the movie The Matrix. That's one of my favorite movies. Once you see The Matrix, you don't think about the world the same ever again. And that's the same with healthcare. When you see what's possible through the eyes of an independent health plan administrator, it's hard to go back to the plans managed by the mainstream carriers. So long story short, you evolve these plans at a pace that makes the most sense for you. But the key is to start off very simple. Your people don't want anything taken away. They want their plan enhanced. But then over time, as we all get smarter as business owners, if you will, in your role, we can start to be more selective, if you want, with where CAVA pays for providers, where you award those incentives. As an example, local to you in DC, the highest quality hospital for a knee replacement is Sibley. And oh, by the way, Sibley charges a third as much as George Washington University. So when you start to get armed with information like this, you might come to me and say, can't we build a plan that only covers certain things like a knee replacement at Sibley? Why would I want to pay for a knee replacement at George Washington if this data is accurate? Bingo. Great question. But the problem is, if I told your people right now that they could only get certain surgeries at Sibley, they wouldn't like that. So part of this is a learning curve for you and your executives, but also for members.
So two last questions. One, I as we've looked at this in the past, as we've started to build up our population on our plan, one of the benchmarks I've seen typically used to say when it justifies or makes sense to move to self-funding is 1,000 team members on your plan. And I'm just curious on your perspective on that, how you think about critical mass and its impact on the viability or benefit of moving to self-funding.
I'm going to go out on a limb and give you a controversial answer to this question. Most employers like you and most consultants like me have been trained by and learned everything they know about healthcare by mainstream insurance carriers who make most of their money through insurance premiums on fully insured business. Personally, most of my experience has been working in self-funded plans managed by independent health plan administrators. And we have plenty of groups. I have plenty of groups under 100 enrolled employees that are self-funded successfully for many years. So that answer that you offered most likely was delivered by a mainstream insurance carrier or came from someone whose training came from a mainstream insurance carrier. Within any self-funded plan, there's two types of stop loss insurance that stop your losses, one on catastrophic claimants and one for company-wide losses if they get too great. And as a buyer, if you understand those two lines of stop loss coverage, personally, I believe self-funding is a viable solution for groups with as few as 50 enrolled employees. It's a matter of risk tolerance and education and understanding what you're buying.
Well, that was going to be my last question. So as a matter from a risk tolerance perspective, and as you think about the kind of crawl, walk, run, and those first few years are crawling and maybe our team's crawling a little slower than we hoped and are not adopting the more cost-saving pathways, what is the outside risk of a self-funded plan versus where we are today on a fully insured plan with some of that stop loss protection?
So I'll start by answering that by saying, based on the size of your company today, your fully insured rates, for the most part, are based on your group's experience. In other words, United Healthcare still pools your risk. In other words, they're bundling your claims experience in with lots of other companies, but they're giving your group's actual claims experience a way heavier weighting based on your size than they might give to a 50 employer group. In other words, for a 50 employer group, when they go to issue a renewal, they're basically looking at the whole pool's block of experience and saying, look, Mr. 50 Life Group, you're getting a 15% increase because our whole pool ran poorly. For a CAVA at 700 enrolled employees, United Healthcare is mostly using your own utilization to set your renewal. So in a way, Brett, you're self-funded. But you're not, you're fully insured. United Healthcare is taking on your catastrophic claims risk, but the premiums you're paying are mostly derived from your historic claims experience. Now, that represents a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is you get penalized when you had a bad year, but you don't pay for it until renewal. So let's say this year, your claims are way higher than your premium. Right now, United Healthcare is paying all that. Come renewal, and they hit you with 35, 40% increase, you're the one that's going to be paying for it. And you're going to be paying for it for the next 12 months and forever, because you know that your premiums seldom, if ever, go backwards or down. They just keep going up every year. Take that same bad claims experience and let's pretend you are self-funded today. Your company-wide claims would be higher. You still have stop loss insurance that's paying any catastrophic claims. And here's the big difference. At renewal, you're prospectively rated, and there's plenty of stop loss carriers that are going to want to bid on your business. Now, granted, your data is transparent. So all those stop loss carriers are going to say, show me the data. Let me bid on this group. But they're looking forward. In other words, if your current stop loss carrier took a bath and took big losses this year, the other stop loss carriers don't care. And it's not as if changing stop loss carriers impacts your people at all. We can bring in a new stop loss carrier and keep your plan exactly the same for your people. And that poor carrier that took a loss this year, so be it. They're gone. They took big losses, but a new stop loss carrier comes in and in this example gives you a favorable renewal. I guess my point to wrap that concept up is, in the fully insured world, you're always reacting, and you're going to pay for it one way or the other. You just pay for it later at renewal. In the self-funded world, all your data is transparent. You can put plans in place so that the high cost claims aren't as high when they actually happen. And at renewal time, you have far more leverage. You have your data, you have consultants that can use that data to your advantage to negotiate more effectively. And there's far more stop loss carriers that are going to want to bid on your business than there are fully insured carriers in your market. Make sense?
Makes sense.
All right, let me try and tie this up for us to get closer to the end here. I want to touch on a couple quick topics. Pooling, I already touched on this. You're in a pool with United Healthcare. In the plans I recommend, the plans I set up with the independent administrator, WellNet, my preference as a consultant is to not pool your risk. If you're an employer that's going to proactively manage your claims risk and have an interest in that, an interest in driving high value utilization, I don't want to share in that good performance with other employers. I want Kava to reap those rewards. And your current environment is pooled. Preferably, if it were up to me, I want to put you in a non-pooled environment, but only if, as a team, we're all going to proactively manage the claims risk and attempt to guide as often as we can to higher value medical care and higher value prescription sourcing. There's different ways. I didn't talk about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, typically our complexion of our team members are on the younger side. Even if we have some high claimants, generally we're younger and more single team members working in our restaurants.
It's worth noting that young single people, they don't have expensive providers waiting in the wings. When they need something, they want to know where they should go. In other words, a 60-year-old guy probably has a cardiologist. He probably uses certain services at the local hospital. But young people are way easier to steer. And so if we put the plan in place and give them the strong enough incentives, when they need the high cost care, they're going to place a phone call. They're going to go where we tell them to go. And that enables us to deliver higher quality care at lower price points. The other opportunity here, and something for you to think about, is how your administrator thinks. United Healthcare, they're a good company in many ways, but they're in a big insurance conglomerate. And most of the money they make, generally speaking, comes from insured plans like the one that you're on. So naturally, you would think as claims go up, United Healthcare likes that because that's the only way they can charge more premiums year after year. If your claims kept going down, they couldn't charge you more and more premium. And so I asked, what kind of administrator would you like? One that for most of their world, they want claims to keep going up? Or in the case of a WellNet, David to Goliath. David whooped Goliath. No one thought he would, but he was smarter. He worked harder. He trained harder. He had a better platform. And so the independent administrators, the way they think is, how do I lower claims? How do I create a better member experience? The mainstream insurance carriers, in my own experience, in my own opinion, they don't pay any mind to the cost of claims. It's quite the opposite. Behind the scenes, they're trying to figure out how to get the cost of claims to keep creeping up because that's the only way they can charge more premium. Food for thought. Okay. And we kind of already touched on this. Self-funding enables smart people to build a smarter health plan. So if you're going to think about self-funding, but not hedge your bet, a hedge in this example is steering people to high value care. If you're not going to hedge your bet at all, I don't know that self-funding is the right answer because it's like playing roulette. Maybe you win, maybe you lose, but certainly when we all work together to create different hedges, the self-funded plan in the long haul will outperform fully insured all day long. And I think every consultant in the country, at least most of them, would agree with that. Over a multi-year period, self-funding will win for employers of just about every size, particularly if you go out 3, 5, or more years. All right, so WellNet, my partner, builds and optimizes these types of health plans. They've got all different ways to optimize it. This is a different version of that crawl, walk, run continuum. We're not going to talk about all these here, but they've got different ways to do it and evolve your plan when you're ready and your team and your members are ready. Here's 2 examples as to why this is so important for your people. So this was on one of the groups I administer. Member needed dialysis. Most plans, probably including yours, subject dialysis service to the deductible and coinsurance. The way that the plan is set up with WellNet, the member gets the dialysis for free. And through a special arrangement that we have from a pricing perspective. And so instead of the Cigna PPO allowance, which was an astronomical number, The health plan paid this much for the dialysis services, same provider, mind you. And the health plan picked up the members' out-of-pocket costs, saving a tremendous amount for the employer and also creating zero cost for the member. And then another example, member needed a kidney transplant. Member was willing to be guided, and they were guided to a center of excellence at Johns Hopkins, and got their kidney transplant paid for 100% by the employer, who incidentally saved a lot of money on that transplant as well. And so, Brett, here's the close. I think from our dialogue today, I think you like what you hear, but this is a Shark Tank session. So what I'd love to do for you, if you're up for it, is to take 1 year's worth of United Healthcare utilization information and build out what I call a toolkit analysis, or I might call it a voluntary pathway analysis, and show you what I could have done with WellNet had WellNet been your health plan administrator last year. It'll show you the money we could have saved you on the medical side, the money on the pharmacy side, and we can also show you how we could have offered all those different voluntary pathways for your people. And so in the spirit of Shark Tank, Brett, are you in or out for that second conversation?
John, I'm always in for saving money and improving the quality of our team members' care.
Cool. Well, Brett, thank you so much for this opportunity. Keith, Megan, thank you for coordinating this.
Excellent. Brett, hey, thank you for being a great shark. And John, you did a terrific job. I think so. I've seen you do this now over 11 years since you've been with our company. And I think, 15 years as a professional in the self-funded space. But I'm curious to see, Brett, for someone who has his hands on all aspects of the business and maybe not health insurance as much, what do you think John did well at today? And what could he have improved on in terms of what he explained from beginning to end?
Yeah, I thought he framed some of the opportunities well, and certainly the crawl, walk, run, and laying out the pathways on how to guide our team members into better decision making that would save themselves and save us money. That's certainly, this is a complex issue, right? And so simplifying it and making it easily understood on how we will benefit from moving from a fully insured to a self-funded without, frankly, losing money or having that risk exposure. One thing we didn't touch on that also I think it can be a little bit intimidating is the administrative side internally, right? What kind of headcount do we need? What kind of resources? What kind of lift is it to manage this internally from our end if we're going to self-fund and kind of own our health plan more versus outsourcing everything to a third party?
Great question.
No, good question. Now, and I'd say this, maybe even to answer that question. Right now, you're outsourcing it, to United Healthcare, right? And we deal with CEOs that are doing the same thing. The difference is you have somebody who is, kind of a, I don't want to say sleep at the wheel, but versus somebody who is riding shotgun with you. There's no doubt there is a little bit more work that is involved in a self-funded plan, but WellNet has a team of individuals in terms of implementation, account managers, member services. It is a very high touch, white glove type of experience. But John, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the initial lift when you go from fully insured to self-funding, there is a steep learning curve for everyone involved. So the first probably 90 days, there's certainly more work for everyone. But after 90 days, it's going to tail off, and there frankly isn't much of a difference between what your team internally is doing today versus what they would in a self-funded environment. For what it's worth, though, I mean, for the size of your company, Brett, if we could lower your trend even by only 3 or 4 points, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Yeah. Hire someone to manage the health plan. I mean, that's what other employers are doing when they see what's possible, and you can actually manage a health plan like another business unit. You'll find someone to head up that business unit.
Right, and showing the payback on that administrative investment, how easily it is returned.
Outside of the comment about, what's it take to manage inside, is there anything else that John should have delved into further that you wish he wound up, communicating and sharing that he may not have?
Nothing that comes to the top of mind. Certainly, I think, and you spoke to it in a decent depth, is just the outside risk, stop loss if we get high claimants. And, I know you mentioned, well, we can find another stop loss provider, but, if you have too many of those kind of years, you burn through too many providers, what happens at that point? Do you get a reputation and people start to stay away from you? just those kind of general concerns, because I know that was, as we've looked at in the past, the biggest concern is just having the wherewithal to deal with maybe an abnormal year or two where we get some high claimants that are unexpected.
No,
It'll be
definitely.
a great exercise to go through. It certainly
Yeah.
chews up too much time for today, but that is a fun exercise to go through, at least for someone like me.
Yeah.
But there are all different ways to address that risk and.
But
John-
very helpful. I mean, we've even seen with our HSA and contributing up to the first like $500 or $1,000 we match, and seeing how it's incentivizing behavior and seeing the claims data on the HSA versus the PPO, and that it's incentivizing better behavior. I'm a big believer in that. The more we can incentivize healthier choices, and whether that's financially or from a wellness standpoint, the better we are and the better our team members are.
No, definitely. And then a question for John, and I do have another one for you, Brett, after. So John, anything that you wish Brett had asked or delved into further as you were going through your presentation?
The question I love is, why aren't more companies using independent health plan administrators, or why haven't I heard about this before? And I'll first start by saying many are. There's lots of big name organizations that you've already heard of that are using an independent administrator like a WellNet. But I think the reason most aren't is they're stuck in this like Groundhog Day of their own, where every year they get a 15% renewal. Their consultant negotiates it down to 6 or 8%, and then you renew. It's the path of least resistance. It's the easy button. And make no mistake, at least from my perspective, that is a game, a well-designed game of 3-card Monte by the insurance carriers. They know you'll renew at 6 to 8%. So it's just, how do we convince a Brett Schulman to believe that 6 or 8% is a great deal? Well, the way to do that is to give them a 20% and then for 3 weeks fuss through how to get it down to 6%. And as long as you get to that number, which the carrier's still making a big profit on, you renew.
Well, I think you
All
made a
it
good.
takes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, John. I think you made a good point early on about how, I think you're right. We were living in that world and it's kind of rinse and repeat and not a lot of differentiation, but in this new hiring environment and what employees are seeking in the world beyond just the paycheck, that it can be a very effective recruitment tool if it's differentiated and communicated effectively versus just being a check of the box. You've got a healthcare plan that matches my previous healthcare plan. I just want to know I'm going to have my same doctor and coverage. But if you can show that it's much more robust and it's going to add tremendous value to them personally, it can be a meaningful recruitment tool.
No doubt. Recruitment and retention.
Yeah.
And so, Brett, talk to us about this, the impact of inflation on your business. What's your view today and what's your view for the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's no one's immune to it. We've seen it both from a cost of goods sold side as well as a labor wage side. We've been a little bit more insulated than most, just the way we build our business over time. Back in 2016, we took our starting wage across the country to $13 an hour in states that a lot of people were paying $8 and $9 an hour back then. Our average hourly wage is almost $17 an hour now. So we didn't have as much ground to make up given our investments over the years. So we haven't had quite as much wage inflation as some of our fast food counterparts or even fast casual peers that were at a lower level coming into this environment. And then from a cost of goods sold standpoint, we directly source about 90% of our ingredients and handle all the inbound freight. So we don't go through like a broadliner that buys on our behalf. So that's also helped us mitigate, especially as we've grown and we've gotten economies of scale on the freight side. But what we've seen recently is that any of the high inflation ingredients that did have some volatility have started to roll over. So the optimist in me says that maybe we're crossing the peak. And I know gas has come down 30 cents a gallon and went below $5 nationally the last couple of weeks. But there's no doubt that, over the past 12 months, we've seen some meaningful inflationary headwinds across the business in general.
No, that's great.
And healthcare is no different.
No, definitely. I mean, I think John spent a bunch of time on it today, right? Claims drive premium, right? If you can lower the cost of the claim, you can lower the cost of the premium. And that's the way that many CEOs and CFOs, they look at the rest of their business, right? And so this is really just another business unit that is third or fourth biggest line item expense that you actually do have the opportunity to not just, lower the cost, right? Improve the care, preserve some cash, but also create value for the company, right? Typically for every company that has got about 500 employees, there's about $1 million in savings for this type of approach, right? Depending on how you all trade, right? That could be another $8 or $16 million in value for the organization. So a lot of private equity firms have now been partnering with us for the same types of things that we're talking about today. You mentioned before.
I agree.
You mentioned before, fully insured, a little bit more restrictive. If you were self-funded, are there things that you'd like to do with your plan, offerings that you'd like to make available, that you may not be able to right now?
Well, even with the recent Supreme Court decision, as we, after the initial brief was leaked, we started looking into what does our plan currently offer for our team members. Remember, we're operating in 24 states. So we're going to have different situations for team members depending on the state they're in. And being a fully insured plan, we saw that we actually have certain restrictions because of the state regulatory insurance agencies in the different states versus a self-funded plan. Now I know that even self-funded plans have some exposure potentially from some of these laws from a criminal risk standpoint. But self-funded plans do give us more flexibility in addressing some of the changes driven by the recent Supreme Court decision and as a byproduct, some of the state trigger laws that are or will go into effect.
Yeah, no doubt. I think a lot of the announcements that you're seeing, from employers, saying they'll allow travel riders as an example is because all those employers are in fact self-insured. So
yeah, so we set up a separate fund in a sense. That's a lifestyle choices fund for our team members, whether it's to reimburse for travel when the health procedure isn't available locally, or even adoption assistance or fertility assistance. So some of that's covered in our plan, or abortion assistance. So it's really kind of covering our team members' choices and giving them options where they may not have some.
got it. That's great. Well, I'll open up the floor, see if anybody has any questions they want to put in the chat box. But John, any last minute remaining items for Brett as we wind down the hour?
No, I didn't have any additional questions. Just thank you again, Brett. I appreciate your candor. This was cool.
Yeah, appreciate your perspectives and insight on self-funded. It's definitely something that's been on our mind, and it only increases every year.
And tell us this, we know a little bit about Kava, but for the audience that's here, and we get a wide view on recordings as well. Tell us what's going on with Kava in terms of where you are today and where you're headed, and a little more about the food and what you're trying to do in the industry, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons, we may have actually gotten to self-funded by now if we hadn't acquired a company back in late 2018. You mentioned Zoe's Kitchen. So we spent the better part of 2019 integrating that business. So to back up, we grew Kava to about 75 locations. It was born out of a single full service restaurant. We took elements from that full service restaurant and some of the dips and spreads that were served in that restaurant that we sold locally at Whole Foods, put it in a fast-paced, walk the line format, build your own bowl, pita, salad. Grew it to 75 restaurants, had the opportunity to acquire Zoe's, which was struggling as a public company. It was actually 3 times our size at that time. Our investors put together the capital. We took it private really as a play to gain scale and a great portfolio of real estate in a wide part of the country we were trying to enter, which is the Sun Belt. So the 3 largest markets were Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta, and embarked on a conversion program once COVID started to loosen up. That got in the way a little bit in the beginning, but we've now converted over 100 of our Zoe's Kitchen to Kava locations, and we will convert the balance and be out of that brand by this time next year and be back to a singular brand state, which is the future brand state of just Kava. And the conversion vehicle has been a really great way for us to accelerate our growth, not only gain a foothold in an attractive part of the country, that we wanted to bring our cuisine to, but it also allows us to do it at about half the cost of a greenfield build and a third of the construction week. So this year alone, we'll open over 80 Cava locations, a large number of those being of the conversions, but we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do that at this moment in our journey if it was all greenfield growth. So that's allowing us to now build out our greenfield pipeline as we tear down conversions next year, ramp up the greenfield builds, and then obviously into 24 and beyond.
Wow, that's incredible. And I imagine what's the revenue generation increase? Has that been better than anticipated as well for each of those conversions?
Yeah, significant. It's why we bought the company. We had at the time about a half a dozen Cava locations, either co-located in the same shopping center or across the intersection. And we were doing almost 2x the revenue. And we felt that a lot of this real estate that Zoe's had in the Sun Belt was very similar real estate, similar to what Chipotle or Panera would have, just was underperforming its potential. And there was a lot of significant dormant value that we could unlock if we applied our brand and our menu offering and format in those locations to the communities. And it's been incredibly well received. So that thesis is played out. And then the thesis of scale has continued to matter more than ever as we've all faced the headwinds of COVID, inflation, labor market tightness. Having larger scale allows us to have the resources to combat those headwinds much more effectively.
Awesome. Well, continued success. And last item, and we'll let you go. We'll give you a couple minutes back, but any parting words for the broker advisor that's joining us today or C-suite executives about their desire to learn more about healthcare? Anything that you'd like to share with those, frankly, on some of the items you learned or maybe didn't, or you gained more familiarity today?
Yeah, I think looking at it as not just an expense, as a strategic component of your P&L, right? That it not only can be a place that you get very efficient and create cost savings and add value to the business, but add significant value to your team members, which inherently creates better retention, better recruitment, lower your turnover, which adds tremendous productivity, and it just continues to kind of be a positive self-feedback loop. So I think just kind of reframing and your people's thinking towards it as just an expense line item as a strategic opportunity on the P&L is a big opportunity.
Terrific. Great feedback. Thank you. And thanks for joining us in our final episode of Shark Tank this year. And you were a terrific participant, John. Excellent job as usual. And thank you all for joining all our guests. And we'll have the replay up shortly. Brett, enjoy the rest of the week and have a terrific July 4th holiday.
Great. Thanks for hosting me.
Thank you all.
Take care, everyone.